Hello, folks. It's Friday, January 20th, Inauguration Day, and it's time for the news. The weather is finally in a rhythm I'm pretty sure we can all appreciate. Today's high will likely top the predicted 74 degrees now forecast. Overnight we'll see high 40s for a low, and 72 should be the high for Saturday. Sunday will be a bit cooler with a low of 43 and a high of 65. Monday should be back up to 70 after a low of 49. Today through Sunday should be partly cloudy and mostly sunny, while Monday through next Saturday are presently expected to be wall-to-wall sunshine. The average low on this date is 38 degrees and the average high is 60. The record high was 83 set in 1972 and the record low was 19 degrees set in 1943. The sun rose this morning at 7:29 and it will set this evening at 6:02. Let's take a brief look at the history of our U.S. presidential inaugurations. The first president, George Washington, was inaugurated at Federal Hall in New York on April 30th, 1789. Washington repeated the oath read by Chancellor Robert Livingston of New York with one hand on the Bible. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, establishing a custom that has been followed by all succeeding presidents. Washington added, "So help me God," at the end. In eloquent Enlightenment form, Washington's inauguration address spoke of the great author of every public and private good, the invisible hand which conducts the affairs of men, a civic virtue required for successful government. Washington needed only 135 words to complete the address at his second inauguration in 1793. Some 48 years later, President William Henry Harrison needed 8,495 words to complete his address. During that address, which lasted some 2 hours in the cold weather, Harrison failed to wear a winter coat and developed pneumonia. He died a month later. The tradition of presidential procession of both the president-elect and soon-to-be ex-president has its roots in the 1837 inauguration. On Inauguration Day that year, Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren met and traveled to the Capitol together in a wooden carriage built from the remains of the USS Constitution. This processional tradition has been followed by all presidents with the exception of outgoing President Andrew Johnson, who in 1869 remained in the Capitol signing legislation until the noon expiration of his term. Thought to be the greatest of all addresses, Abraham Lincoln gave his second inauguration address in March 1865. With the Union embroiled in civil war, Lincoln invoked God to bring a speedy end to the fighting. However, he went on to state his acceptance if God were to allow bloodshed to continue after hundreds of years of slavery, because the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Under the 20th Amendment, the date of the presidential inauguration was moved from March to January 20th, which falls a couple of weeks after the certification of votes of the Electoral College. The last president to be inaugurated in March after an election year was Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1933. After re-election in 1936, Roosevelt was the first president to be inaugurated under the new amendment on January 20th, 1937. Roosevelt's 1933 inauguration is also noteworthy because of what he did before his swearing in. FDR went with his wife to St. John's Episcopal Church for a church service on the morning of March 4th, setting a presidential precedent of attending an inaugural day worship event. In 1961, John F. Kennedy became the United States' youngest and first Catholic president. During his inaugural address on January 20th, he delivered his now famous words, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Ronald Reagan broke with tradition in 1981 by having his presidential inauguration at the U.S. Capitol's West Front, which could hold more visitors than the normally used East Front. Today, the presidential inauguration carries on the traditions of inaugurations past. Well, that's the news for now. I'm Tom Allred reporting. Now we'll get back to those original hits of the 50s and 60s, right here on 1500 KBRN in Boerne, Texas. If you already know the worst that can happen in a given situation, what's stopping you from pursuing the very best?